the sleeper is like on another level now. See how she does in a transition. Welcome back, I'm Tedward. Welcome to Charlotte, North Carolina, and welcome to the all-new 2025 Chevy Blazer SS. This is the new sporty variant of their mid-size EV SUV, and it actually delivers. This is pretty cool. It has 615 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque, 0 to 60, and get this, 3.4 seconds as they claim. And I think I actually got a little bit faster when I tested it. I'll show you that in a minute. And lucky for us, this is not simply an SS badge slapped onto some funky new body panels. No, it actually has some upgrades. So a larger battery, I believe 102 kilowatt hours, makes for a 303-mile range up from the others. But the real star of the show is this rear motor and these brakes. Yes, you can differentiate the SS from its different fascia and a couple little tidbits here and there, like this side skirt that actually reminds me of my Honda Civic Type R right here. But down here behind its 22-inch wheels and 275 section tires are 6-piston Brembo brakes that bring this thing down from a hurry. So it's not designed to be a sports car or a track car, but they did bring us on a racetrack in order to exploit its handling. And frankly, it does more than it has any business doing out on a racetrack, because this is still a wildly practical family vehicle. Look at this. We've got lots of stuff. I've got a drive partner today. You'll meet Tom in a minute. But still tons of space for stuff, as you'd expect out of the standard Blazer. And then the rear, tons of legroom back here. This is one of the nicest things about these cars. You get loads of legroom. That's my seating position right there. I am nowhere near bumping knees on that chair. 3 setting heated seats on the outboards. You got USB-C charging back here. HVAC vents in the middle. That's great. Some cars don't give you HVAC vents for the rear seats. And then up front, standard GM fare. This is all good stuff. And now with this Google system, you can actually stream video. So if you're charging or parked, you can watch HBO Max. You can watch Amazon Prime stuff. So you can sit and watch TV while you're charging. That's really nice, because not all charge stations are built equal. Some of them are next to a nice restaurant or even a Panera or something that you can just kind of go in, get a coffee and a bite to eat. Some are in the middle of nowhere and very boring, and maybe you just want to sit and watch White Lotus while you charge up for that 15 or 20 minutes. Giant panoramic roof. This is optional. There's not many options on these cars. They come fairly loaded, which includes standard Supercruise, which we appreciate because Supercruise is a really nice hands-free driving system. Familiar charge port location, and it'll charge at 190 kilowatts. So not the fastest in the game, but certainly fast enough to get the job done. So let's take it out on the track, see how it handles, and then we'll see what its road manners are going to be like, because they've stiffened up the suspension a bit to manage the extra power, torque, and try to dial it in a little bit so it can take a corner a little better than its non-SS counterparts. To differentiate the SS from its lesser brothers, its slower brothers, it has a different front fascia, so that looks a little bit different. If you were to debadge it, you'd still notice that it wasn't the standard Blazer. SS-specific wheels, and you can see that right here. The side skirts turn into these little winglets, which follows around to the rear valance right here. And then you even get smoked out, or I should say clear taillights, which are not available on the standard car. And we're off.
Yep, that's fine.
That's pretty legit. 3.3. It's a claimed 3.4, so hey, not bad. So they've stiffened this up a bit with anti-roll bars and springs and dampers. Ooh, look at the camber in here. This is nice, fresh club pavement. Oh, great power. We're gonna push a little bit because obviously this sort of family-oriented sporty SUV is going to preserve us from looping, but that's all right. It's still behaving pretty nicely. I'm a little wide on that, but that's okay. We'll chase them down anyway. See how she does in a transition. It's pretty impressive what it's doing stability control wise, just to keep things in check without being too intrusive. See, that's me getting on the brakes at the wrong time and upsetting it, and it's still hanging tight. It's doing a good job with those rear brakes. But you've got to manage, this is still about 5,500 pounds, so weight management in a car like this is a different animal. But man, the acceleration is pretty noticeable. But if I'm clumsy on my weight transfer, it's definitely coming through in the car. So you're just gonna be really smooth and gentle. All right, so now let's get some on-road driving impressions of this Blazer SS, because that's where this thing is going to live. And before we even get out of here, why don't we check on our drive modes? We're gonna go into wow mode just because it gives us an extra 200 pound-feet of torque, and that is significant. Great visibility, no launch control, but we'll hit it hard. And while from an absolute dig on a launch control, you're gonna get a 3.4 second 0 to 60. I got a 3.3 at the track yesterday, so that was pretty impressive. That's nice that that's a conservative number that Chevrolet put out, but you're likely not doing that very often, and it feels pretty good that you can jump on the road and just have that at your disposal whenever you need it. Is that great for the general public? I'm not so sure, but the general public is likely not choosing the SS, so it's just a car that, oddly, I'm not quite certain who this is for just yet, because I'm glad it exists. It's cool that we have an SS variant, and maybe it's just to bring some more people into the EV side of the GM portfolio. But I had no complaints with the drivability and speed of the standard Blazer EV. Even the Equinox EV is fine. It's like pretty adequate situation. And I was just talking with Tom earlier about how we wish they would then now do an Equinox EV SS, because this is cool. It's neat. And having more, especially when it comes to power and brakes, is usually a good thing. What's nice though is that they've played the sportification game, so it's stiffer and it's faster and it brakes better. The steering ratio is tighter, but it really hasn't compromised road feel. If anything, I feel like the car's more composed maybe than the standard Blazer. But it's not chattering my teeth out. It's always a difficult game for these manufacturers to play with heavy EVs, because this is around 5,500 pounds, and trying to get this thing damped and springed correctly without bouncing or without being too stiff, well, that's a trick. And this is a static suspension, not variable, not adjustable. They kind of had to hit that mark just right. And, so far so good. We are on some pretty nicely curated roads. I may have a different tune if we were in New England or Detroit, because those roads can get a little more ugly. But out here in North Carolina, I think this is a nice little cruiser without any real compromise to maintain its performance. One thing that I am going to do is this heads-up display is very large, and I'm not a heads-up display guy. I know a lot of people love this, and I wanted to show it off to you just because it exists and it's there, and I think that's a selling point for most people. But somewhere in here there's a HUD button. I don't know, Tom, can you look for that? Because this is where I get tripped up on some of these vehicles, because
let's go to settings, vehicle. Yeah, welcome to our world, folks.
I think there's a HUD thing somewhere. Maybe it's vehicle. No, it's not there. Here's your modes.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. I think sometimes these HUD, there you go. Controls and safety, power, boom, got it. All right. But like I said, sometimes, you know, if this is your car, you know where that is. I'm in and out of cars all day long in different vehicles, and it can be a little tricky. But for me, the simpler, the more ergonomic these kind of things are, the better. And frankly, if I had a HUD on-off button over here, that would have been a little nicer than having to go through a screen. That's just a personal preference, though, for me. The conversation around EVs always leans on the ICE enthusiasts saying, well, they have no personality, there's nothing interesting about these cars, they're soulless. But I have to admit that adding some power and 6-piston Brembos and stiffening up this chassis does add a bit of character to it. It does feel a little more exciting than the standard cars. I've done so many drives in, say, the Bolt and the Equinox and even this Blazer in non-SS trim, and it is a car. Those are just cars. They're very functional vehicles because there's loads of room, they're good cargo space, they're compact, so it doesn't feel like I'm trying to park a Suburban everywhere I go, and I'm not trying to hustle some large 3-row SUV down rural roads, or dealing with it in traffic or in the city, or wondering if my air suspension being up is going to impact the roof on the ceiling of a Chinatown garage in Boston, because that is a real fear. But I think these mid-size SUVs are just the right size for most people, because we've already grown up in size and so many things. Like my Civic Type R is a much larger vehicle than you would have gotten in the mid-90s or early 2000s. But what I can do is I can fit an entire road bike without taking off the front wheel in that hatchback. There's a chopper out there. Easily distracted. This, however, you know, there's no question that you'd fit a couple of mountain bikes in this thing. This would definitely fit into like normal people's daily lives. But if you're looking for a little bit more of a thrill because you're like, well, you know, I want an EV because of the practicality, or because of my lifestyle, or because of my commute, or because of some financial incentive or reason, but I also don't want it to be boring. I don't want to drive a boring car. You know, luckily, EVs are typically pretty quick. We have things like the Tesla Model 3 Performance. You can get a Model S Plaid. Those are almost on the extreme side. And also, I don't find those to be like well-balanced cars. It feels like they've really just thrown power at them without taking into consideration the rest of the thing. This really feels like a nice, well-rounded package, and I'm glad, because one thing we do really like about GM is their chassis engineers. And so when these feel well balanced, it gives us what we liked about our Camaro, which you may still own. You know, you may have the Weekender, that's your sports car, and this may just be getting you to and fro work. But why should I have to be bored in my car on my commute? You know, I still would like to have 600 plus horsepower and a whole bunch of torque. Now we're getting over some little bit of bumpy roads, and yeah, you feel it, but I don't think it's jarring whatsoever. Yeah, that's okay. If you're looking for the luxury ride, they have that. You can go get yourself a Lyriq, but the Lyriq doesn't do what this does in terms of handling, and that's what's wild, is that these Ultium platform vehicles are so varied. There's such a difference between all of these cars, and it's instantly recognizable when you get behind the wheel. Ooh, look at these guys. The vultures are out, man.
Holy cow.
They are interested in something in the road.
Oh, right there.
That's gnarly. We'll go over that. We got a little bit of ground clearance. We've got 77% battery, so they're not looking for us.
No.
We're not dead in the water.
Nope.
Now, it's got a reasonable range of 303 claimed miles with its 102, I believe, kilowatt hour battery. So it's a bigger battery than you'd get in the standard Blazer. That means a little more weight, which is interesting that the performance car ends up with more weight, right? Usually in the performance car world, we shed weight, but in this, they're giving it power, so you end up gaining a little bit of weight. That's why I think we just really haven't seen proper performance EVs, is because to get the power and the range, you need to add the battery, and we don't have the batteries that can do the thing without the weight yet. So in the future, maybe we'll get there, but for now, we are a bit in a conundrum. There's a little bit of paradox there. Throttle tuning, I'm quite happy with. I'm not even in like the sport or competition mode right now, but I just think they do a pretty good job of making sure that even the most like violently aggressive driver is probably not going to give too much whiplash to their passengers. You know, in the conservative comfort modes, the normal modes with this throttle, it's still not too long of a travel, but it's not so sensitive that it's trying to make me feel sporty. I don't like that. It's like when they weight up the steering too heavy on a BMW. It's like, okay, you gave me more weight, but you didn't give me more tactility. You're still very aware of weight transfer. And these tires, they howl a little bit at not a whole lot of G-force. You know, they're going to talk to you a little bit. And I think that's sort of the hallmark we've found of these like performance EVs, is that it doesn't take much to hear those tires and get a little bit of that energy coming out in the form of auditory vibrations. But you know, while this may not be your first choice for a canyon carver, it does the job. And it's egging me on just a little bit. Again, we're talking about an Ultium platform that we've driven before. I do not feel egged on in the standard Blazer the way I feel egged on in this, because I feel like it's controlling its pitch, dive, and roll better than that vehicle. And the Honda Prologue we can put in that category as well. Will it take a corner? Absolutely. But I always feel like it's more trying to reel me in and say, just relax and take the kids to practice and don't worry about that corner. Whereas when you do a more proper suspension on this SS variant, it actually makes a difference. Now, obviously you have the option for one pedal driving. It's not my style. I typically don't do that. But remember, when you get into the brakes, you're not actually engaging the brakes until a certain threshold is reached. So you are regenning when you get into that pedal. You can watch that occur, but you can also use the little regen paddle behind the wheel. I love these so much, but GM has two variants of this paddle. There's the binary paddle, which we have here. You can hear it click. Now you push it, it clicks, it progressively increases the regen. So we'll get up to speed, click the paddle, right? Okay. They also make a variable version of this, which is like on a spring. And I always feel like that's the differentiator in GM vehicles between what they consider a more high-end or luxury vehicle versus a low-end or entry-level vehicle. So I'm a little surprised that this has the binary version of it. Not because it's a Blazer, but because it's the SS, and you're paying kind of that $60,000 mark. I would have liked that. It's not the biggest complaint, but it's just a little note that I wish they would just put the variable one in all the cars. I don't know why we need to do this. It'd be nice if that control was awarded to me or afforded to me on every version of their EVs. Now, if you want to hold your coffee for a second, I'm just going to lay into it. We're not going to do a launch control, but when we have a clear shot, I want to show you how inoffensive an electric vehicle with 615 horsepower can be. We'll wait for this Explorer fella.
Clear.
Now, in a Camaro SS1 LE, that would have been theatrical. It would have been making a statement. Anyone near me, anyone outside their house mowing their lawn would have heard me do that, and they'd come and look, and maybe they'd like it. Maybe they're car enthusiasts. I see some nice 11s on the street here. Maybe this is car-friendly territory, but maybe it's not. And maybe someone's sick of someone driving a little fast or a little aggressive, and maybe you weren't even speeding. Maybe you just hit a 1-2 and shut her down. But the noise says everything about what you've been up to. And in these EVs, I know that that's a missing component of the driving experience for enthusiasts. However, if you are just trying to get somewhere and you want to go a little fast, no one's the wiser. You could launch that in Harvard Square in Cambridge, and unless someone actually noticed the speed of your vehicle, they are not going to have any offensive opinion about you. It's just going to be like a car went by. The sleeper is like on another level now. You know, we used to look at like an Impala SS from 96 or something like that and think of that, oh, that's like a little bit of a sleeper car. You wouldn't expect that. The E39 M5, if you know, you know, but it's kind of a sleeper car. Well, sleepers now are EVs that are faster than their ICE counterparts, at least from a 0 to 60 perspective. The SS does come standard with Supercruise, so you get 3 years of that before you have to pay for any subscriptions, but look, on this little road here, hands-free driving, that little guy turns green, oddly a very pleasing green. It's blinking at me. We'll find out. There we go. Okay, maybe it just wasn't recognizing my camera on my face. Usually not a problem with Supercruise, but it is true hands-free driving, so if you've never used it before, you've got to understand that it can drive itself. You are still required to maintain focus on the road. It's watching your eyes. It's making sure that you're not just sitting on your phone, because you shouldn't be. You should still be checking what's going on, and you are the pilot in command. If this gets into an accident, I'm liable. GM's not liable. I am, because this is an assisted system. It's not like a level 3 crazy thing. Those are pretty rare these days. But it does take a bit of the burden of driving off of you, because believe it or not, when you're on a really long drive, I'm gonna get it. See, it's funny how Supercruise sometimes is like a little more aggressive than I would necessarily be. Like, I trust that it was going to slow down, but I'd rather maintain that gap a little more than it would. But that's a good thing, honestly, because you can tell it to do that. I haven't really played with any settings here right now. You can still tell it to back off. But other systems are a little too conservative, which means that they're essentially useless. There's this level of, is it going to make the pass or not? Or is it going to let me make the lane change or not? And if it's too conservative, then you might as well not use it, because now you're just holding up traffic in the left lane instead of moving back over to the right. And if it's too aggressive, then you're going along for a ride that you didn't really want to, or maybe you're signaling to other drivers that you're being aggressive, and that's going to cause some road rage incident. You've got to find that middle ground. Now, I don't need a car to drive for me, but on a long drive, especially on a highway drive, when you're doing kind of monotonous miles, Supercruise does allow you to get to your destination on a long drive much more refreshed. I feel like it does a lot of the heavy lifting for me, and I don't have to think too hard about it. And it's kind of like flying business class when you are used to flying coach, and suddenly you're like, oh, I actually want to go to work when I land, instead of like, I need a nap. That's it. That's the beauty of it. But what I hope is that these don't encourage more distracted driving, because I certainly don't want to see people not paying attention to the road, because the car can only do so much. There are times where it recognizes things that it's going to be unable to manage, and you've got to take back over. So you've always got to be ready to take over at a moment's notice, but this is pretty nifty tech, and the fact that it can do this on these back roads safely is pretty impressive. So I think that's going to do it here for the Blazer EV SS, or the Blazer SS EV. I got to learn what their nomenclature is on the website. But at the end of the day, at around $60,000, and I think that's before incentives, this starts to make a bit of sense, because I believe that's what you'd pay for like a Honda Prologue, right? I mean,
something like that, yeah.
You know, this is a performance variant of a vehicle that didn't really need a performance variant, and I was surprised that this existed. When I got the invite to this, I thought, oh, okay, they are really doing this. I knew there was talk about it, but I wasn't sure what the vibe was going to be and if they were really going to go for it. And it seems like they're going for it, and usually when GM sticks to a strategy, they roll it out across more of their portfolio, which is telling me that anecdotally might be able to expect more of this kind of treatment in their lineup, whether it's for enthusiasts or just to attract more people to new vehicles that they otherwise wouldn't have considered. Like, this is genuinely quick. And yeah, it's just, I having driven the original Blazer EV, I never would have anticipated that this would have been the path it took, and that it could be done in a stable way that actually is kind of fun to drive. I don't want to mislead you and make you think that this is like the sports car of sports cars. It's not. But if you were leaning toward an EV, but it wasn't giving you the fizz, this might tip you right over the edge. It's just enough that it's excessive power, it's well braked, but it's also pretty well damped and sprung that it's going to be an entertaining thing to kind of chuck around on the commute if you've got that one or two little arm ramp. Or if you have that place where it's a real nightmare to get into traffic, the point and shoot abilities of this thing are quite good. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. We're going to do what EVs do best now, and sit in traffic without burning fuel. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.